Johnny Carson had just finished his opening monologue on The Tonight Show when he turned to his guest Clint Eastwood and said something that was meant to be a joke. But what Clint did next left Johnny in tears and revealed a secret the toughest man in Hollywood had kept hidden for 15 years. It was November 14, 1985. NBC Studios in Burbank, California. The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson was about to air one of the most unforgettable moments in television history, and nobody saw it coming. This wasn't a planned segment. There were no rehearsals, no scripts. What happened that night was raw, unfiltered, and so emotionally powerful that crew members who had worked on the show for decades would later say they'd never experienced anything like it. The studio audience, 465 people who had waited months for tickets, had no idea they were about to witness something that would change how America saw Clint Eastwood forever. Johnny was at the peak of his career, 23 years behind that desk. He'd interviewed presidents, movie stars, and legends from every corner of entertainment. He thought he'd seen it all. He was wrong. When Clint Eastwood walked out from behind that famous rainbow curtain, the audience erupted. He moved with that slow, deliberate stride that had made him an icon. 6 feet 4 inches, eyes that could stop a man cold at 50 paces, the embodiment of American toughness. He shook Johnny's hand and settled into the guest chair. What most viewers didn't know was that these two men had been friends for nearly 20 years. Golf games at Johnny's Malibu home, late-night dinners where the cameras were far away. They knew each other beyond the Hollywood masks. The interview started normally. Clint was promoting his new film, Pale Rider. They traded stories. The audience laughed. Everything felt comfortable, routine. But about 15 minutes in, Johnny leaned forward with that mischievous twinkle in his eye. He was about to make a joke. A simple, harmless joke between old friends. What Johnny didn't know, what nobody in that studio knew, was that his joke would unlock a story Clint Eastwood had buried since the night his father died in a hospital room in 1970. A promise made, a promise kept in secret, and a grief so deep that the man who never showed weakness was about to break down on national television. Before we go any further, let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. And if you're new here, welcome to Celebrity Unseen, where we bring you the untold stories behind the legends. The interview had been going smoothly. Clint was relaxed, charming the audience with behind-the-scenes stories from the set of Pale Rider. His dry humor had the crowd eating out of his hand. Then Johnny decided to have some fun. He mentioned that Clint was known as the strong, silent type. Referenced his iconic roles, the man with no name, Dirty Harry, the cowboy who spoke more with his squint than with words. The audience chuckled. Johnny leaned back, that familiar grin spreading across his face. You know, Clint, I've heard some interesting rumors about you over the years. Hidden talents, things you don't talk about. Clint raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Johnny gestured dramatically toward the grand piano sitting near Doc Severin's band. I heard somewhere that you actually play piano. Is that true, or is that just Hollywood nonsense? The audience laughed. The idea seemed absurd. Dirty Harry tickling the ivories. The man who'd shot 500 bad guys on screen, sitting down for a gentle melody. Johnny pressed harder, milking the moment. Come on, why don't you play us something? I mean, you've handled every weapon known to man in your movies. Surely, you can handle a piano. Ed McMahon's famous laugh echoed through the studio. The audience joined in, but Clint wasn't laughing. He sat very still in that guest chair. His expression shifted just slightly, but Johnny noticed. After 23 years of reading guests, he could feel when the energy in the room changed. Something had changed. Clint looked down at his hands. Large hands. Hands that had built an empire on screen. Hands that suddenly seemed uncertain. The laughter in the studio began to fade. 3 seconds of silence. 5 seconds. In television. That's an eternity. Johnny started to backpedal. Hey, I'm just kidding around, Clint. You don't have to. Actually, Johnny. Clint's voice was quiet, measured, but there was something underneath it. Something heavy. I think I will. Johnny's eyebrows shot up. Wait, you're serious? Clint stood slowly from the guest chair. The audience murmured, confused. He walked toward the piano, his boots echoing on the stage floor. Each step deliberate, each step carrying the weight of something no one in that room understood. He sat down at the bench. His hands hovered over the keys. The studio went completely silent. Doc Severn lowered his trumpet. Ed McMahon's smile faded into something solemn. Camera operators exchanged glances. Johnny stood from behind his desk, walking closer. His instincts told him something significant was about to happen. And then, for the first time in his career, America saw something in Clint Eastwood's eyes they had never seen before. Vulnerability. What happened in the next 3 minutes would reveal a secret Clint carried since the night his father died. A promise made in a hospital room that he thought he'd never have to share with anyone. To understand why this moment mattered so much, we have to go back to Oakland, California during the Great Depression. Clinton Eastwood Jr. was born on May 31, 1930 in San Francisco, California. But stability wasn't something the Eastwood family knew. During the Great Depression, Clint's father, Clinton Sr., chased work wherever he could find it. The family moved constantly. Oakland, Piedmont, Sacramento, Pacific Palisades, Spokane. By the time Clint was 15, he'd lived in more towns than most people visit in a lifetime. His father worked as a steel worker, a gas station attendant, a bond salesman, whatever it took to keep food on the table. His mother, Ruth, held the family together through sheer willpower. She was the steady hand when everything else was chaos. They had almost nothing during those early years. But Clinton Eastwood Sr. had a secret love, music, specifically the piano. In his youth before the Depression crushed so many dreams, Clinton Sr. had really played jazz standards, Beethoven, sometimes his own compositions. He was talented. Talented enough that people who heard him said he could have done something with it. But life got in the way. Work, family, survival. The piano became a distant memory, something he touched only in stolen moments. Late at night, when young Clint was supposed to be sleeping, he would hear it. His father sitting at whatever old piano they had access to, playing softly in the darkness. The notes floating through the thin walls of whatever rented house they were living in that year. Clint would sneak out of bed and sit on the stairs listening. His father never knew he was there. Those stolen moments became some of Clint's most treasured childhood memories. The sound of his father finding peace in a world that offered him so little of it. Clint wanted to learn, but there was no money for lessons, no time. And his father, proud as he was, never offered to teach him. Maybe because the piano represented everything he'd given up. As Clint grew older and started dreaming of Hollywood, his father supported him completely. Even when others said acting was a fool's dream, even when the rejection letters piled up, "You've got something special, son." Clinton Sr. would say, "Don't let anyone tell you different." One evening in 1965, Clint, now a rising star thanks to the spaghetti westerns, sat with his father at the family home in Northern California. Clinton Sr. was older now. His health was beginning to fade. They shared drinks on the back porch as the sun went down. His father grew quiet, reflective. "Clint, can I ask you something?" "Anything, Dad?" "One day, when you have time, when the movies slow down, will you learn to play piano?" Clint looked at him surprised. "Not for audiences," his father continued. "Not for Hollywood. Just learn it for yourself. Show people that tough guys can be gentle, too. That strength and music aren't opposites." Clint smiled, not fully understanding the weight of the request. "Sure, Dad." One day he'd promised the way sons promised their fathers things casually, lovingly, without realizing how much those words would come to mean. Then life happened. The man with no name, Dirty Harry, director, producer, Hollywood legend. The promise faded into the background noise of a career lived at full intensity until February 1970 when Clint received a phone call that changed everything. His father had suffered a massive heart attack. The doctor said to come quickly. There wasn't much time. Clint dropped everything. He was on set in the middle of production, but none of that mattered. He flew to Los Angeles immediately, drove straight to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, and walked into a room where his father lay connected to machines that beeped a rhythm no son ever wants to hear. Clinton Eastwood, Sr., the man who had worked every job imaginable, who had survived the Depression, who had held his family together through impossible years, looked small in that hospital bed, fragile. Clint had never seen his father look fragile before. His mother, Ruth, was already there, her face streaked with tears, but her posture straight, holding it together the way she always had. Clint sat down beside the bed and took his father's hand. For 3 days, he barely left that room. They talked when his father was lucid, about the old days, the moves from city to city, the hard times and the good times, about how proud his father was of everything Clint had built. But something hung in the air between them, unfinished business that neither wanted to name. On the second night, when it was just the two of them, Ruth had finally gone to rest. Clinton Sr. reached for his son's hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were still sharp. "Do you remember what you promised me, son?" For a moment, Clint didn't understand. Then it hit him like a freight train. The back porch, the sunset, the conversation about piano. "Dad, His father squeezed his hand gently. It's okay, son. You've made me prouder than any father has a right to be. Forget about it. You've done enough. But it wasn't okay for Clint. It wasn't okay at all. That night, after his father fell asleep, Clint made phone calls. He found a piano, had it brought to a private room down the hall from his father's room. The hospital staff thought he'd lost his mind. Clint Eastwood didn't care. For the next 48 hours, while his father drifted in and out of consciousness, Clint practiced. He'd taken scattered lessons over the years, nothing serious, but now he practiced like his life depended on it. His fingers HDHD, his back screamed from hunching over the keys. He wasn't trying to become a concert pianist. He was trying to keep a promise before time ran out. On the third night, February 22, 1970, the doctor said Clinton Sr. was awake, alert. One of his final lucid windows. Clint had the nurses wheel the piano into his father's room. Clinton Sr.'s eyes widened when he saw it. Son, what are you? Just listen, Dad. Please. Clint sat down at that piano, his large hands trembling over the keys. Not from fear, from love, from grief, from the weight of everything he wanted to say but couldn't find words for. He played Misty, the Errol Garner jazz standard, his father's favorite song, the one Clinton Sr. used to play late at night when he thought no one was listening. Clint's playing wasn't perfect. His fingers stumbled in places. He missed notes, but it didn't matter. The room filled with music, and Clinton Eastwood, Sr., began to cry. You remembered, his father whispered. After all these years, you remembered. Clint couldn't speak. He just kept playing. When the last note faded, he looked at his father. The old man was smiling through his tears. A smile Clint would carry with him for the rest of his life. That's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever done for me, son. Thank you. They held hands in silence. The machines beeped softly. The world outside continued spinning. But in that room, time stood still. 2 days later, Clinton Eastwood, Sr., died peacefully in his sleep. He died knowing his son had kept his promise. Clint never told anyone about that night. Not the press, not his co-stars, not even most of his family. The piano was quietly removed from the hospital. Clint returned to work and buried the grief the way he buried everything behind the stoic facade the world expected. For 15 years, that moment stayed private. The song stayed silent until Johnny Carson made a joke. Now sitting at that piano on the Tonight Show stage, Clint Eastwood felt the weight of 15 years pressing down on him. 465 people watched, millions more at home. His hands hovered over the keys, and for the first time since his father's hospital room, Clint Eastwood prepared to play. The studio lights felt hotter than Clint remembered. The silence felt heavier than any Western standoff. His fingers touched the keys. The first notes of Misty floated through Studio One at NBC Burbank. The audience stirred. Some recognized the song. But it wasn't what he played that stunned them. It was how he played. Not like a movie star showing off a party trick. Not like a celebrity doing something quirky for laughs. Like a man playing for someone who wasn't there anymore. Every note carried weight. Every pause held memory. Every chord seemed to pull something from deep inside him. Something he'd kept locked away for 15 years. Doc Severinsen set down his trumpet, watching in disbelief. The band members exchanged glances. Ed McMahon's jovial expression faded into something solemn. The audience sat frozen. No one coughed. No one shifted. No one breathed. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was sacred. Johnny Carson stood behind his desk, mouth slightly open. The king of late night, the man who had a quip for everything, who could fill any silence with a joke, was completely speechless. Tears began streaming down his face. He removed his glasses, wiped his eyes, put them back on, wiped them again. He'd known Clint for 20 years. He'd never known this man existed. The final notes of Misty hung in the air. Clint's hands lingered on the keys for a moment, then silence. Complete absolute silence, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 7 seconds. An eternity in television. And then the audience erupted, not in applause, but in a standing ovation. People were crying in their seats. Strangers gripped each other's hands. Crew members who'd seen everything in their careers stood with tears running down their faces. Johnny walked slowly to the piano, his own tears still flowing. Clint. His voice cracked. My God, I had no idea. Why didn't you ever tell me? Clint looked up, his own eyes glistening. Something America had never seen and never expected to see. Some things aren't meant to be told, Johnny. They're meant to be kept. Johnny sat down on the piano bench beside his friend. The cameras kept rolling. The producers knew they had something extraordinary, something that could never be recreated or rehearsed. That wasn't just a song, was it? Clint shook his head slowly. Who was it for? A long pause. Clint's jaw tightened. The mask he'd worn for decades threatened to crack completely. My father, he died in 1970. I played this for him the night before he passed. Haven't played it since. Johnny put his arm around Clint's shoulder. Two icons, two men who'd built careers on image and control, sitting together in a moment of raw, unscripted humanity. Clint, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize, Johnny. Clint's voice was rough but steady. My dad would have loved this. He always said music was meant to be shared. I've been keeping it to myself for 15 years. Maybe it was time. The audience remained standing, many still crying. Ed McMahon dabbed his eyes with a handkerchief. In 30 years of television, Johnny Carson had experienced almost everything. But this was different. This was real. And what Johnny did next turned this private revelation into something much bigger. Something that would touch thousands of lives and create a legacy neither man could have imagined. If this story is touching your heart, let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from tonight? Johnny stood up from the piano bench and faced the camera. His eyes were still red, his voice still thick with emotion. But there was something new in his expression. Purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, he said slowly. I've been doing this show for 23 years. I've had thousands of guests, seen thousands of moments. But what just happened? That's something I'll never forget. He paused, composing himself. Clint's father believed that music could reach places words couldn't, that it could heal people. Tonight, I think everyone in this room felt that. The audience applauded softly, still emotional. Johnny continued, I want to do something right now tonight. He announced that he was making a personal donation, $100,000, to the Music Teachers National Association specifically for programs that bring music education to kids who can't afford it. Kids whose parents work factory jobs and night shifts. Kids like Clint was. Kids who deserve a chance to find what music can give them. The studio erupted in applause. But the story didn't end there. The next morning, NBC's phone lines were overwhelmed. Viewers from across America wanted to contribute. The switchboard couldn't handle the volume. Frank Sinatra, who had watched from his home, called personally to pledge $50,000. Dean Martin matched it. Within 1 week, donations exceeded $500,000. The Clint Eastwood Senior Music Education Fund was formally established 3 months later. It provided instruments and lessons to children from low-income families, kids who might never have touched a piano otherwise. Clint was overwhelmed by the response. In a rare interview weeks later, he said, My father worked his whole life just to keep food on the table. He never had nice things, never got to chase his own dreams, but now his name is helping kids learn music. He would have cried for a week. Newspapers across the country ran the story, the softer side of Dirty Harry, Eastwood's secret talent, the promise behind the legend. But the coverage wasn't tabloid gossip or Hollywood drama. It was treated as something genuine, a human moment that transcended celebrity. Thousands of letters poured into NBC addressed to Clint. People shared their own stories, promises made to parents, dreams deferred, lessons learned too late. One letter came from a factory worker in Ohio. Mr. Eastwood, I made a promise to my father 20 years ago to finish my education. After watching you on Johnny's show, I enrolled in night school yesterday. Thank you. Clint read every single letter. The man who built his image on silence and strength had shown America something unexpected. That the toughest men carry the deepest love. That keeping a promise to your father matters more than any movie role. And that sometimes the man with no name has the most important story of all. Today, the Clint Eastwood Senior Music Education Fund has helped over 40,000 children across America learn to play piano. It operates in 42 states, partners with 300 schools, provides free instruments and lessons to families who could never afford them otherwise. Clint has donated millions to the fund over the years, quietly without press releases or publicity tours. That's not his style. Every year on February 22nd, the anniversary of his father's death, Clint sits at a piano in his home in Carmel, California. Alone. No cameras, no audience, no recognition. And he plays Misty just to keep the conversation going. Johnny Carson, before he passed away in 2005, spoke about that night in a rare interview. That moment with Clint taught me something I'll never forget. Johnny said, we all wear masks. We all have roles we play for the world. But underneath, we're all just kids who loved our parents and hoped we made them proud. In a 2015 interview, Clint was asked about that Tonight Show appearance. He paused for a long moment before answering. Johnny thought he was making a joke, but I think my dad sent him that joke. I really do. My father wanted the world to know that tough guys can be gentle, that strength and music aren't opposites. Johnny just delivered the message. Behind every legend is a human being. Behind every tough exterior is someone who made a promise to their mother or father. Someone who carries that promise even when the world sees only the persona. A joke meant to get laughs became a promise fulfilled. A father honored. Thousands of children given the gift of music. Clint still has the sheet music from Misty that he played in his father's hospital room in 1970. Yellowed, worn at the edges. It sits in a frame in his private study right next to a photograph of Clint Eastwood Sr. Because some promises aren't made to be kept once, they're made to be kept forever. And sometimes the man with no name has the most important story of all. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss another story. And let me know in the comments what promise have you kept for someone you love.